Hi, Tim Vandesloos here. I wanted to put together a video so you could watch me do some carving. It's been a while since I've done additional carving videos specific. I've done a lot of tools and equipment videos. So I wanted to take a moment and let you watch me do some carving. And I wanted to talk about one-dimensionality and how to overcome that in our carvings. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so this carving video is not so much about specifically what I'm doing when. You will see in the lower thirds what burr I'm using, but I wanted to take this video and talk about one-dimensionality. Every so often I'll get an email from one of you and you're asking how to do this technique or that technique and what burrs to use and stuff like that. So I wanted to discuss what are the things that help us as we're carving overcome one-dimensionality. Now there's four things that really help with this. Now one-dimensionality is when we have a carving, and even though we might go through and establish a bunch of layers, so different elements reside at different heights on the carving, one of the problems that I see is that even though they're on different layers, they're still flat. They're still very one-dimensional. In order to create the illusion of 3 dimensions and to bring life into our carvings, there's some things that we need to do. Unfortunately, the first one is probably the most difficult one. Alright, and that is carving deeper than we're comfortable. That's one of the hardest things to do. When I first started carving, and I was noticing that my carvings just weren't alive enough. They just seemed a little flat. The challenge was to take that burr and just go really deep. I said, okay, on this carving, I need to carve deeper than I've ever carved before. All right, now wearing a Optivisor magnifying glass, looking at that carving, the burr looks bigger than it really is. The carving looks bigger than it really is. And I know that I'm not carving in a really deep surface. Okay, so that was like, what do I do? But the moment I said, I am going to carve as deep as I can, all of a sudden, I pushed past that apprehension. There's always a little bit of apprehension, a little bit of fear. Oh, what if I mess up? All right, now the second I went ahead and pushed past that first carving really broke through the barriers for me. It didn't take long for me to go ahead and be able to do that time and time again. Now there's different ways to do this. As you can see right now, I'm using a number 10 round carbide, and that's really to hog away the material. Because the carbide is so good at removing material quickly, I'm able to dig down and get deeper into the carving, and then I can come back and refine it. Alright, so this is the rough out stage that you're watching right now. And it's very important to see that it's possible. Now that's probably the most challenging aspect of creating more three-dimensionality, is going deeper than our comfort zone wants to allow us. All right, the next bit, or the next challenge to overcome is once we get that depth, then there's things we have to consider. All right? The interaction of each element is important to take into account here. But if we want to bring a carving to life, all right, if we really want it to have that realism, like it's alive, like it's flowing on the page, or on the wood, on the paper, whatever it is we're doing, we need to consider the interaction of each element. What element lies on top of the other, how they interact together, where they come together. And that is determined somewhat by the layers and levels, yes, but also in order to create the separation, the depth, the life, we have to look at the texturing that we use. All right, as I'm doing each of these petals on this carving, I'm not just haphazardly creating strokes here. What I'm trying to do is create the flow of each petal. Each petal originates from somewhere. And so in order to create that, I'm thinking about, okay, where's the texture of this petal coming from? Where is it going? And as each petal comes out and intersects with the one before it and after it, next to it, that texturing changes. We have to think about it individually, as individual elements. Not all of it is going to be exactly the same. You look at the leaves, and each leaf, even though they look the same, they all originate from that center stem. And each leaf is independent of the ones around it. And so that texturing reflects that. So right here I've gone back to a number 10 round carbide, and I've removed a bunch of material in the middle of the petals. Now here is the third thing we have to look at in order to create that dimensionality, to overcome the one-dimensionality. When we look at a flower, when we look at any element, any aspect of what we're carving, any piece of it, it's not going to be flat. There's the saying that nothing in nature is a straight line. All right, and that has to be reflected in our carvings. All right, things go up and down, and they weave in and out, and they move forward and backwards. And that is how we can bring more realism and life into our carvings. All right, these petals don't just come out and curve. You know, some of them come out and they stick up on the end. Some of them roll and they go in and out. And some of them go up and over and the end of the petal is dipping low. These are all aspects of the carving that we as artists get to determine. Not every petal is doing the same thing. Not every leaf is doing the same thing. The interaction between elements causes a reaction to the elements next to it and above it and below it. So we need to consider how each element interacts with its surroundings and how it perhaps grows differently or shapes differently. Now, these dips in these petals that I'm carving right now, they're indicative of maybe something else was pushing on it or laying on it at the time, and it kind of developed that depression and grew out around whatever was going on. It's like storytelling. We get to determine how this came to be, and we're telling that story through our carving, through how each element looks. So when you look at your carvings, if they look one-dimensional to you, if you can see there's something missing, there's something quote-unquote wrong, there's something that you just can't quite put your finger on, that's good. That's your artistic side coming out and saying, hey, there is something missing that would make this carving look better. Now, as the artist, it's your job to go out and find out what that is. All right? So take a look at your carvings. Check out the separation between layers and levels. Do you have that established? Determine the flow of your pieces. Do they interact well with each other? And how does the texturing influence the look of your carving? If you're texturing, if that one specific thing, if everything else is perfect, but the texturing itself doesn't match the rest of what is being told by your carving, it's not going to seem right. So it's all of these things coming together that determine the overall look and quality and whether or not the carving is one-dimensional or three-dimensional in appearance. All right, I hope that little discussion helps, and watching this video gives you some ideas. Have fun carving. As always, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Go over to carvingonwood.com. Have fun and enjoy your day.